reading science and actually reading other nonfiction texts too can be a little bit tough. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of times in nonfiction, they stuff a whole lot of information into just a few sentences. So you have to read more slowly, and sometimes you have to move a little bit carefully in order to get all the pieces of information that have been crammed in there. Today I'm going to teach you a strategy called coding that can help you with reading difficult text. Here are the codes that we're going to use. The first one is an exclamation mark. And we're going to stick that next to any sentences that we think are, or any sections of sentences that we think are especially important. The second code is a check mark, where I knew that, because sometimes when you read stuff, you're like, you know what, I already knew about that, and that is just, got it. Then there's the X, and that means that the thing that you're reading is different from what you thought. And the question mark is just a general, I don't understand. So it could be, I have a specific question about this, or it could just be a generic, like, this sentence is not making sense to me, or this section is not making sense to me. So just those 4 codes, and I'm going to show you now how to use them, reading through a portion of an article that you're going to read today. Every sport has an elaborate list of rules for keeping things fair. In track, runners start at different places along the oval race course, depending on what lane they're in. Oh yeah, I know that. I remember seeing that on a track when I was a kid and seeing that there were all these different start places. Runners in the innermost lanes are behind those in the outermost ones. That way, the athletes in the outside lanes don't have a longer distance to run than the athletes in the inside lanes. See figure 1. Okay, anytime you're reading science and it says something about an illustration, a diagram, a figure, you always want to look at it. And here it says the outside and inside track lanes, and I can see how this is physically longer than this line here. If I tried to like smush them together, this one would just maybe come there and there. Okay, that seems like it might be important, so I'm going to put an exclamation mark there. In soccer, teams trade sides halfway through the game in case one side of the field is easier to play on. I remember that from when I played soccer. In Olympic swimming, the 2 outer lanes of the pool aren't used because those lanes have rougher waves that are more difficult to swim through. You know what? That is not what I thought. I always thought those outer lanes were not used because that people might bump into the wall or something. Okay, so you can see that I went through here and I put codes in the places where I felt like I should put codes, but I didn't put a code for every sentence. I just put it in the places where I had a little bit of a reaction or I thought about something and wanted to make a response. And so I would expect about this many codes, 2 to 4 probably per a chunk of text this size. So we talked about the idea of coding, but there's also the part about making it actually physically work. And one way is to do what I did, which was to print out a piece of paper and just write your codes on the article as you go. That's the way I prefer to do it, because then I don't have to think about anything but what I'm reading, and I don't have to focus on how to make the technology work. But I know a lot of you prefer to do it all on the computer. And so here's a couple of other ways that you could code. You could, for example, say you wanted to make a code for this. If you were in Google Docs, you could highlight an area and then hit add a comment. And then you could just put question mark. And then you could come on down here and say you wanted to mark this with a check mark. Well, check marks aren't very easy to access from the keyboard, so you might just write check if you wanted to do that. Another way that you could do it would be to go to markup. And so here it is opened as a PDF on markup. And if you're going to use markup, you probably want to use the pen, and you probably want to use a pretty skinny line, either size 1 or size 2, so you don't end up writing all over the text and you can't make sense of your codes. And in that case, let's say you had something you thought was important, and you could just draw a exclamation point there, or if it was something that you had a question about, you could just put in a question mark. So those are 3 easy ways to do it. You can do it on Markup Hero, you can do it using the comments on Google Docs, or you can just print it out and use a pencil or pen. In the comments for this card, I want you to tell me which of those methods, or a 4th method that you can come up with, you plan on using to do your coding.